Histoires de Parfum has quickly become one of my favourite niche fragrance houses. I currently have 3 of their fragrances in my collection, and I've tried several others and I've really liked them all, and there's obviously a few more that I would like to add to my collection. By popular demand, based on my last video, I asked viewers to choose for me the fragrance which they would like to see me review, and it was pretty overwhelming that the one they wanted to hear about was 1740 by Histoires de Parfum, the 1740 being part of a series of fragrances based on the year of birth, I think, of famous authors. So I actually have 1740, which is based on the Marquis de Sade's year of birth, and I also have 1899, which I believe is Ernest Hemingway's year of birth. That one obviously being named after Ernest Hemingway. But we're going to talk about this one today, so stick around and we'll go through it. Histoires de Parfum 1740 was released in 2000. It is classified as an Oriental Woody in Fragrantica, but honestly, as I've said before, that type of classification really doesn't mean much to me. It's probably no secret if you watched my channel, enough of my channel before. I've mentioned this before. This is one of my favorite fragrances in my collection. I'll delve deeper into the opening, mids and dry downs, but essentially what this fragrance gives me is, if you want to break it down in the simplest terms, you could describe it in 2 words as smoky leather, but obviously there is a lot more to this if you scratch beneath the surface. When, as you see the notes running across the screen, when you spray this on, you get a lovely bright combination of citrus, which is probably bergamot, nothing too sharp. There is also sweetness here, which I am going to attribute to the listed note of Immortelle. Now, I have not had the opportunity of smelling Immortelle essential oil in isolation. I've only smelled it when it's been part of perfume. So the best I could do in this case is to read about Immortelle and kind of get an idea of what kind of smell you can get from it. Now, it is described variously as anything like toasted bread. There is a sweetness to it, but one description I thought captured it quite accurately was burnt sugar and ham, and what that immediately reminds me of is glazed Christmas ham, baked Christmas ham, and you certainly get that. You get some kind of that replicated smell in the opening here. So it opens up with the citrus and this like smoky sweetness that comes from presumably the Immortelle. What then happens from the opening, it develops and you start to get a little bit of this dried spice, so it's dry roasted spice. There's a bit of dryness, so I know that there's coriander here. I get a bit of the coriander, but it's sort of softened by cardamom. So if you can imagine getting these spices, putting them in a dry hot pan and just warming them up, and getting that kind of dry spiciness that really turns into the it's more so of a transition from that brighter citrusy Swedish opening. You transition through the spices, and then the dry down is essentially this combination of birch, which provides a really nice thick smokiness. Now, when I say thick, it's not a wispy smokiness. It's like a nice velvety layer of smoke atop of this leather accord, and you get a little bit of labdanum that gives it a bit of an ambery feel. And then there is also this almost sharp green cedar there. The cedar's there, and that could be the elemi resin that's in here as well. But really, what happens is everything works together to create this fragrance that one moment is just the most simple, straightforward fragrance of smoky leather, but then you smell it and you think, oh, there's a really lovely, you pick up this really lovely sweet, it's not even a sweet vanilla, it's almost like a real vanilla as opposed to a synthetic vanillin. You get that almost boozy kind of vanilla in this fragrance, but that's just one aspect, and it no single note or accord ever really dominates in this fragrance, and I think that's where this fragrance really succeeds or excels, is that all the parts in isolation aren't spectacular or dominate or are the star of the show. They're all working together. One note is there to accentuate another note, to accentuate the next note, to accentuate the next note, and this is truly a fragrance where the whole is so much greater than the parts, and than the individual parts. So to sum up that description, everything is very perfectly balanced and blended, and it's a type of fragrance that each time you wear, you discover something new about it. And it develops, even though I would probably describe it as not having a lot of development, when you get an opportunity to smell the opening to the dry down, it is a different fragrance, as good fragrances probably should be, or non-linear ones should be. It's such a pleasant opening, pleasant, sweet, citrusy. It's a really nice, almost caramel opening, offset by the bergamot, so it's not too sweet. And when I talk about sweetness, I'm not talking about gourmand sweetness. There is sweetness. There is almost a bitter, like sort of freshly sawn wood element in there. You have the whole spectrum of the palette going on in this fragrance, but then you reduce it again to this beautifully blended smoky leather fragrance that just seems to have everything. It is a very sensual fragrance. It's certainly a mood changing fragrance. It is unisex, possibly leaning a bit masculine, but definitely nothing here where I would suggest that women shouldn't try this. Women should try men's and men should try women's fragrances. Fragrance is genderless. This fragrance keeps you interested in the whole of its wearing, and this fragrance has excellent longevity on my skin, 10 hours. It has very good projection for the first few hours. It is probably more suitable for cooler weather I wouldn't say that it's only suitable for formal occasions, because you should just wear fragrance when you feel like it. It's probably not the greatest work-friendly, office-friendly fragrance. This is really, to me, is a statement fragrance, and not to say that you need to be a certain personality to wear it. You're either gonna smell this fragrance and love it, or you won't warm to it. This fragrance is, if I had to go by reviews and videos here on YouTube, is pretty much loved by the fragrance community. However, I could understand if someone was smelling this, and probably someone who hasn't smelled a lot of niche perfumery and is, only smelled the stuff you find in department stores, mainly designers, and they smell this. It's probably like nothing they've smelled before, but I would say it's a great introduction into niche perfumery, because, like I said, none of the individual elements of this fragrance are amplified to an extent where they can offend. There's birch tar in this fragrance, which in some fragrances, when it's pushed to 11, can be really challenging to begin with. And because everything is just blended beautifully, balanced beautifully, and you pick up, if you smell this enough, you pick up little elements of each of the ingredients. It's a fragrance to be appreciated. It's a fragrance to be worn and loved. And I love 1740 Marquis de Sade by Histoires de Parfum, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So please check out 1740, check out Histoires de Parfum, check out their whole range. I know that they have a great discovery set available, but if you have a store that stocks them, go in there and check them all out. It's all quality, and I hope you enjoyed that review for 1740. I'll see you next time.